All right, so now we're starting chapter 10. We're looking at Congress. Hopefully, this will be helpful for you as you are working your way through this first section. We want to start by thinking about what Congress is. And we start, of course, by looking at how it was set up in the Constitution. I'm going to abbreviate here for space purposes. And we are looking at Article 1, which lays out all of the powers and responsibilities and everything that we need to know about Congress. There are a lot of things that were left up to the states, but the Constitution does a lot of these things. For example, it deals with the apportionment. Make sure that you understand this apportionment idea. This is how we end up with 435 members of the House of Representatives and how many representatives each state gets. Okay? And then remember that that is determined by the census, which then leads to the apportionment every 10 years. And then as they reapportion, we end up having to redraw our districts. And we are looking at redistricting at that point. Okay? So it's making sure that you understand those key ideas about how we get there. We'll talk about the powers of Congress in a little bit in another section when we come back to chapter 2. As we look at the House and the Senate, we do want to make sure that we are looking at some comparisons. Remember, this is the bicameral, all right, which means there are two chambers. The House, they serve for 2 years. The Senate, they serve for 6 years. Members of the House have to be at least 25 years old. The Senate, they have to be at least 30 years old. Those are actually done on purpose. Founding Fathers wanted to make sure that the Senate was a little bit more insulated from popular opinion. They were afraid of the people. And I'm going to put popular opinion, and then I'll throw insulated here, because you want to make sure that they're a little bit less subject to the whims of the people. So keep that in mind as we kind of go through that. There are 435 members of the House. There are 100 members of the Senate. This 100 is set constitutionally. This 435 is set by law and can change. It hasn't changed in about 100 years or so, but that's kind of where it is. And make sure, though, that you understand that the two of these things are equal power. All right, the House is not less important or more important than the Senate. We also want to think of the constituencies. Okay, constituency of a member of the House is the congressional district. All right, and those are the things that are drawn every 10 years. The constituency of a senator is, of course, the entire state. Okay. So keep those things in mind. These are just some basics as you kind of work through this, and it's an absolute mess, but hopefully it'll make more sense as you kind of go through it. The idea of representation is important for us to consider as we consider the ways that minorities have been denied their political rights throughout the course of the history of America. In the course of the last 50 years, political rights and political equality has certainly become better, and we've started to see more and more minorities representing their districts in Congress, though in the Senate it's much less so. Many women, about 20 women, but very few racial minorities. So the question is, do we need more racial minorities in the House and the Senate that will better represent the, I don't want to say the needs is a very difficult thing to say, but the political interests of the minorities? Or can a middle-aged white man represent the interests of African Americans or women or Asians or Hispanics and equally? And it really is something that we need to consider. And we'll talk much more about this in class because we really do want to spend time thinking about that and getting to it. But I wanted to make sure that I included it here in this presentation because it's a key point that you need to be thinking about as you continue to work through here and consider if minorities are being underrepresented If so, should we change it? Is the system still skewed against them? Things along those lines. The final thing is, as we kind of get into elections, we really want to think about this idea of the incumbent advantages. Okay? There are many of them, and the book lists them. I'm not going to list them here, but what you need to think about is once somebody gets elected to Congress or the Senate, the House or the Senate in this case, they have a tremendous advantage over anybody who would challenge them. This is why the re-election rates, especially in the House, are tremendous, over 90%. In the Senate, it's a little bit less, but you still see a vast majority of members getting re-elected. And a lot of it has to do with this idea of the incumbent advantages. One of the most important of the incumbent advantages, and for any person running for election, is this idea of name recognition. Okay? And all of the things, not all of them, but many of the things that are listed as incumbent advantages really do help to boost this name recognition. So, if somebody does decide to run against an incumbent, they are already at a disadvantage. A lot of times they're at such a disadvantage that they choose to not even run. And that's a major problem in our system. I mean, if popular sovereignty is, again, another core value, and we don't have this competition for who's going to represent us, is the people's voice really being heard? Think about it here in Massachusetts. There are very few Republicans who can win, but there are plenty of Republicans in Massachusetts. It's interesting to think about that when we talk about this idea of incumbent advantages. And this ties back as well to how the gerrymandering works as far as giving the parties political advantage. It's another advantage that they have. Okay? So keep that in mind as you kind of look at that. Money also plays a role. Incumbents are better recognized. They're already in power. Special interests are willing to give them money because they are going to be the ones passing legislation. So why would you bet on a challenger when most representatives are reelected? And so this is, again, another huge advantage as far as the incumbents have. Think about that, and we'll talk much more about whether or not this is fair and whether or not it can be fixed